There's never going to be another Ozzy. He's the only one that's one Ozzy, and that's it. Just a special person, just the way he is. He's naturally, he says what he thinks.
Tony Iommi just broke 54 years of silence in the most devastating way imaginable. The man who literally invented heavy metal, who spent over 5 decades being the most diplomatic figure in rock history, just unleashed a statement so brutal it's sending shockwaves through the entire music industry.
It doesn't matter.
But I think
Ozzy Osbourne, who just died, bless him.
This wasn't some heated Twitter rant or emotional outburst. This was surgical precision from someone who's been quietly watching, waiting, and documenting for decades. And when Tony Iommi finally decides to destroy someone's reputation, he doesn't just throw punches, he performs character assassination with the accuracy of a master craftsman. Here's what triggered this nuclear response that nobody saw coming. The spark that lit the fire. Roger Waters recently gave a scathing interview where he dismissed Ozzy Osbourne as representing idiocy and nonsense, claiming that Ozzy's influence on music was predominantly negative, and that heavy metal as a genre was nothing more than intellectual regression disguised as rebellion. Waters didn't stop there. He went on to say that Black Sabbath's legacy was built on cheap shock value rather than genuine artistry, and that the entire heavy metal movement had set back serious rock music by decades. Now, if you know anything about Tony Iommi, you know he's the one guy in metal who never responds to provocations. This is the man who stayed diplomatic when every band on earth claimed they invented his sound. He kept quiet when progressive rock critics spent decades dismissing Black Sabbath as a primitive noise. He's been nothing but gracious to everyone from thrash pioneers to nu metal bands, even when they completely copied his innovations without giving proper credit. Iommi has built his entire reputation on being the gentleman of heavy metal, the founding father who never burns bridges and always takes the high road. So for him to come out swinging at Roger Waters like this isn't just surprising, it's a complete character revelation that suggests something much deeper and more personal than anyone realized. The statement that shook the world. In his official response, Iommi said something that left the entire music industry stunned. Roger Waters has spent 50 years masquerading as an artist of integrity while systematically undermining other musicians behind the scenes. His attack on heavy metal and Ozzy's legacy is just the latest example of behavior I've witnessed since the early 1970s. I've stayed quiet because I believed in taking the high road, but watching Roger attack an entire genre and dismiss the artistry of musicians who've influenced millions has shown me that sometimes silence just enables toxic people to keep being toxic. The heavy metal community's reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Iommi's statement was trending globally, with every major metal artist either rallying to support him or completely stunned that the diplomatic Sabbath guitarist had finally broken his golden rule about public conflicts. But what really sent shockwaves through the industry was the realization that if Tony Iommi felt strongly enough to break 5 decades of gracious silence, then Roger Waters must have crossed a line that goes far beyond his comments about Ozzy. The calculated destruction. Here's the part that's got industry insiders completely baffled. Iommi's statement wasn't a reactive emotional response. This wasn't Tony getting upset about Waters attacking his genre and firing off an angry reply. The language was too precise, too calculated, too perfectly crafted to systematically destroy Waters' reputation as someone who fights for artistic integrity. This was strategic warfare from someone who's been thinking about this moment for a very long time. The most telling detail is how Iommi positioned his attack. He didn't just defend heavy metal's legacy, he used Waters' behavior toward metal as evidence of a much larger pattern of toxic behavior that Iommi has apparently been observing since the early 1970s. This wasn't about defending his genre. This was about finally exposing someone whose character Iommi has been questioning privately for over 50 years. The hidden history. Because here's what nobody's talking about yet. Tony Iommi and Roger Waters have serious history. Complicated, decades-old history that's been carefully hidden from public view. The roots of this conflict trace back to the early 1970s, when both Black Sabbath and Pink Floyd were emerging as revolutionary forces in British rock. But while the public saw two bands pushing boundaries in different directions, industry insiders knew there was tension brewing beneath the surface. It all started in 1971, during a pivotal moment in rock history. Black Sabbath had just released their groundbreaking debut album and were on the verge of their international breakthrough. They were still seen as a dangerous novelty act rather than serious artists. Record labels were interested, but they wanted to control and sanitize Sabbath's sound, turning them into a commercial product that would lose everything revolutionary about their music. That's when Waters first entered the picture. He positioned himself as a mentor to emerging British rock bands, someone who understood the struggle against record label manipulation because Pink Floyd had fought similar battles. Waters reached out to Sabbath's management, offering advice about contract negotiations and promising to use Pink Floyd's industry connections to help Sabbath get a fair deal. Iommi was initially suspicious of Waters' motives, but the other band members were convinced that having Pink Floyd's support would legitimize their artistic credibility. Waters seemed genuinely committed to helping them, often calling to check on their progress and offering detailed advice about negotiation strategies. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. While Waters was publicly supporting Sabbath and privately offering strategic advice, he was simultaneously working behind the scenes to undermine their attempts at gaining industry respect. Waters had discovered that he could advance progressive rock's cultural position by systematically positioning heavy metal as inferior music. The betrayal reached its peak during a crucial industry showcase that could have changed Sabbath's entire trajectory. Waters, who had been privy to Sabbath's strategic plans, allegedly used his insider knowledge to ensure that progressive rock acts received preferential treatment while heavy metal bands were marginalized. Industry sources reveal that Waters didn't just compete with heavy metal, he actively worked to exclude it from serious consideration. He cultivated relationships with influential critics and systematically fed them talking points designed to minimize metal's cultural significance while promoting progressive rock as sophisticated art. The timing of Iommi's statement is also strategically brilliant. He waited until Waters had already shown his dismissive attitude toward an entire genre and its fans, until public opinion was already questioning Waters' approach, until the perfect moment to deliver a statement that would do maximum damage to Waters' credibility as a champion of artistic integrity. The avalanche effect. What happened next was unprecedented in rock history. Within 48 hours of Iommi's statement, other metal legends began coming forward with their own Roger Waters stories. Jimmy Page was the first to join Iommi's coordinated response, releasing his own explosive statement revealing how Waters had spent years spreading false rumors about Led Zeppelin's creative process to other musicians and industry executives. Page disclosed that Waters had told multiple artists that Zeppelin's success was based on volume and spectacle rather than genuine musical innovation, systematically undermining their artistic credibility behind the scenes. But Page's revelation was just the opening salvo. Robert Plant followed with his own bombshell, exposing how Waters had actively lobbied against Zeppelin's recognition at major industry events, arguing to committee members that hard rock bands didn't deserve the same level of artistic consideration as progressive rock acts. Plant revealed that Waters had provided industry gatekeepers with detailed analyses designed to delay recognition for metal pioneers while ensuring progressive rock received priority treatment. The coordinated revelations continued with Deep Purple's surviving members, who disclosed that Waters had sabotaged their contract renegotiations in the late 70s by spreading rumors about the declining market for heavy rock. Waters had advised them to accept whatever terms their label offered, while simultaneously providing those same label executives with insider information about Deep Purple's financial pressures and negotiation deadlines. Geezer Butler, Iommi's own bandmate, delivered perhaps the most damaging testimony of all. He disclosed decades of Waters' condescending comments about heavy metal's intellectual capacity, revealing private conversations where Waters had dismissed metal musicians as technically competent but artistically primitive, and argued that heavy music appealed only to the least sophisticated segment of rock audiences. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source: Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple and Rainbow. Blackmore, known for his own confrontational personality, revealed that Waters had approached him in 1974 with a proposal to elevate his music by moving away from heavy sounds toward more progressive arrangements. Waters had promised Blackmore industry support and critical recognition if he would publicly distance himself from the primitive heavy metal scene and embrace more intellectually sophisticated musical approaches. When Blackmore refused, Waters allegedly launched a whisper campaign suggesting that Blackmore's guitar virtuosity was wasted on simplistic heavy music and that he would never be taken seriously as long as he remained associated with metal acts. Within 72 hours of Iommi's initial statement, the most respected names in heavy metal history were coming forward with their own Roger Waters horror stories, creating an avalanche of evidence that Waters had systematically betrayed and undermined every major metal act for decades. The testimonials revealed a pattern of behavior that went far beyond casual musical rivalry. Waters had apparently conducted a coordinated campaign to position progressive rock as intellectually superior, while systematically undermining heavy metal's attempts at artistic legitimacy. The master strategy revealed. But this coordinated revelation wasn't accidental or spontaneous. Industry insiders are now revealing that Iommi had been preparing this moment for years, quietly building alliances and documenting Waters' behavior with the patience of a master strategist. The brilliance of Iommi's plan becomes clear when you understand what he's been doing behind the scenes. He didn't just collect grievances, he built a case. He waited for Waters to reveal his true attitude toward heavy metal publicly, then used that moment to provide other metal legends with the perfect platform to share their own evidence of Waters' systematic dismissal of their genre. This wasn't emotional revenge. This was methodical destruction of someone who had spent decades undermining heavy metal's artistic credibility while positioning himself as a defender of musical integrity. The industry earthquake. The immediate industry response has been unprecedented. Major music publications are scrambling to examine decades of coverage that may have been influenced by Waters' systematic campaign against heavy metal's legitimacy. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has quietly begun reviewing their historical presentations to ensure accurate representation of heavy metal's contributions without the distortion that Waters' influence may have created. Music streaming platforms are reorganizing their artistic integrity playlists, removing the implicit hierarchy that positioned progressive rock as inherently more sophisticated than heavy metal. But the most significant consequence is how this has fundamentally shifted the power dynamics within classic rock's established order. For 50 years, progressive rock has been positioned as more artistically important than heavy metal. But Iommi's revelations suggest this positioning may have been artificially maintained through systematic influence rather than genuine artistic superiority. The long game victory. Tony Iommi's strategic patience has been absolutely perfect. He spent 50 years collecting evidence, building alliances, and waiting for the ideal moment to strike. His decision to wait until Waters publicly dismissed heavy metal provided the moral authority needed to justify breaking decades of diplomatic silence while ensuring maximum impact for his devastating revelations. The metal revolution that Tony Iommi just unleashed is reshaping how we understand rock history. Waters will no longer be seen simply as Pink Floyd's bass player and creative force, but as someone whose systematic dismissal of heavy metal ultimately led to his own credibility crisis and metal's long overdue recognition as rock music's most powerful and innovative force. The final checkmate industry sources promise this is just the beginning. Iommi's opening move has created momentum for even more revelations about the hidden dynamics between progressive rock and heavy metal that shaped decades of music history. The man who created the heaviest sound on earth just proved that patient, methodical strategy is infinitely more devastating than immediate emotional response. His 50-year wait for the perfect moment has resulted in the complete exposure of his opponent's character and the vindication of an entire musical genre. Tony Iommi's master plan proves that when the founding father of heavy metal finally decides to fight back, he doesn't just win the battle, he rewrites the entire war. The silent giant has spoken, and the music world will never be the same. This story is developing rapidly, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The metal legends are preparing their next phase of revelations that promise to completely destroy what's left of Roger Waters' reputation. Industry insiders are whispering about documentation so explosive it will rewrite rock history forever. Make sure you're getting every update on this unprecedented rock war. Hit that notification bell so you're instantly alerted when we drop the exclusive details about Iommi's next strategic strike. Share this video with every metalhead you know. They deserve to know the truth about how their favorite genre was systematically sabotaged for decades. This isn't just music drama. This is the vindication of heavy metal itself. Drop a comment below. Do you think Tony Iommi's 50-year revenge plan was the most brilliant strategy in rock history? What other secrets do you think he's been hiding about the progressive rock establishment? The war between metal and prog isn't over. It's just getting started. And you're going to want front row seats for every devastating revelation that's coming next.